Tick-tock, time to rock. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone who's watching from all around the world. I'm your friendly neighborhood philosopher, David Wood, and with me now is the CEO of Minds.com, Bill Ottman. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, those of you who were watching last year, which is probably a good number of you, will remember that last year I posted a video called something like Minds.com is garbage or something like that. And that came after a little disagreement about how they were dealing with some material. But one thing very interesting that happened was once I posted that, I started getting messages from people saying, hey, the CEO, Bill Ottman, is saying you should contact him about this and discuss this, which I thought was very weird because, as all of you know, you can't get in touch with anyone at YouTube for anything, let alone the CEO. You're not going to get in touch with anyone at Twitter. You're not going to get in touch with anyone at Facebook. And if you do manage to get in touch with anyone on those platforms, you get some really, really weird, clueless people who have no respect whatsoever for free speech or anything like that. And so very disheartening on the main social media platforms. And so it was weird. It was weird that someone who actually runs a platform was saying that I should contact him. And then more recently, he sent me an email and said, hey, you want to talk about what happened last year? And I said, well, why don't we discuss it live? So we're going to be talking about what happened last year, and we'll all get an idea of what the policies on Minds are and so on. We'll do that in a couple of minutes. I just wanted to get some background from Bill Ottman. So if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your platform before we get into any of the specifics.
Hey, yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. So, Minds is a open source social network dedicated to internet freedom. We have a First Amendment based content policy. We are as transparent as possible. Anyone can inspect our code, make sure there's no shady algorithms or surveillance. Anyone could actually take our whole code base and make their own platform with our code, and we encourage that actually. Additionally, we're really interested in decentralizing our infrastructure. We leverage the blockchain in a handful of ways.
Now, quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but suppose that some of us are completely technologically illiterate on most of this stuff, and so that when you say things like open chain or block such and such, that we don't actually know what you're talking about there.
Block source, open chain. Yeah. Okay. So imagine the big tech companies are all housed on central servers that are like in a warehouse that only they control.
Okay.
So decentralized infrastructures, which, we don't claim to be fully decentralized, but these are powered by computers all over the world that cannot be taken down. So if you compare like Bitcoin, for instance, or Ethereum or, another kind of cryptocurrency to a fiat money system, it's like, the dollar and other central currencies are controlled by a much smaller group of people, and they can influence, they can inflate, they can make these determinations on a whim. In Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's decentralized. It's not controlled by a small group of people. So in the same way, if your content is on Facebook or Google or Twitter, it's much more subject to getting taken down if it's on central infrastructure as opposed to decentral infrastructure. So, there's good and bad things about that. In certain circumstances, you want your content to be totally uncensorable. You may want to unleash it into the abyss of torrents and blockchains and all this stuff where it can't get deleted. Or you may want to publish it to a computer where you can delete it and you want to have that control over it. So we believe you should have both options. You should be able to control it as a user. And relating to what happened with, I think one of your posts got tagged as NSFW. So because we're a First Amendment focused company in terms of our content policy, we allowed the full spectrum. So, you'll definitely see some more edgy stuff. And, unfortunately, there exists sort of a area in the middle where, people disagree over whether that counts as NSFW or not. We definitely don't censor NSFW content. I mean, Facebook and Twitter, they just don't even allow you to have it. We want all of that content to be able to exist. So, there's certain areas where, say there's a piece of content where, it's very violent. Then, some people may think that that should have a blur on it. Others don't. We actually built a jury system so that if people disagree with our decision, it can get appealed. And our appeal system doesn't go to us. Our appeal system goes to the community. And we intentionally built that to protect against ourselves because, we're a company and we understand that, there's potential for mistakes to be made or for bias to leak in. And so we wanted our appeal system to be in the hands of the community. I believe that that's what happened with your content. I think that one of your posts got reported and then it got marked. It just got blurred, and I think you got a strike, but you have to understand you cannot get banned for having NSFW content on Minds. So even though you got a strike, and I understand that like seemed scary, you weren't even close to getting banned. That wasn't in the realm of possibilities. It was just putting a blur on your channel, on that piece of content. So I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but you appealed it and it got reversed. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. Just got a quick question from Black Angel here who says, what is NSFW? That's not safe for work, Black Angel. So the idea here is if you have a platform like Minds or BitChute, which isn't going to be as quick to block content, then what happens if people are on the platform at work and they don't block certain kinds of content that might not be safe if your boss walks by? So content that might not be exactly what it sounds like, not safe for work if someone walks by. Is that right? Because I didn't know what it was either when I
sorry, I should have said that from the beginning. But I mean, I post NSFW content once in a while. I think that, say you're posting war footage or a risque photo or a piece of art from 300 years ago that may have a little thing right on your body part that's not allowed to be on the big network. So NSFW isn't necessarily a positive or negative thing. I think that we can agree that certain content is, probably could have a blur over it. And if you want to see that, you can opt in to see that. We have a setting so that you don't have to see the blurs. And I'm actually opted into that setting so that I don't see blurs. I see all the content. But we just think that if somebody signs up, you don't want to just be throwing that in their face. You kind of want to give a normal person the control over that setting.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I want to, I want to share my thoughts on this because I'm not crazy about that system, and yet I'm not sure what the system should be. In other words, we do have this situation where we look at Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and say, you guys are losing your minds with all the stuff that you're banning. You're calling everything hate speech, even if it doesn't come within 1,000 miles of anything any rational human being would consider hate speech. They're blocking content, and yet, depending on where you draw the line, if you say, okay, if someone said we're not going to block anything, then you're going to end up with you need to take a bath after going to the site because you're going to run into so much horrible content. And so how do you respect freedom of speech while not seeing all kinds of horrible content that you just don't want to interact with? So that's kind of the issue. I'm not sure exactly how to navigate that, but I'll share my thought. I'll basically share my thought process last year. So last year I got the thing, I got the notification saying that I was getting a strike for my content being not safe for work, but I hadn't labeled it as not safe for work, and that I could appeal, and it would go to. And I had been on a couple of those jury decisions where I would get a notification saying, "Hey, look at this content. Do you think that this should have this label on it or something like that?" So. So anyway, I'm familiar with how the system works. That people get a notification asking them, "Hey, could you take a look at this real quick?" My video was just people who had sent me messages saying, I believe I haven't gone back and looked at that, but basically people had sent me notifications saying that they were becoming Christians in various parts of the Muslim world and so on, or Muslims who have become Christians. And I think that's what the video was. I posted that. And so my thoughts were, I understand completely having a not safe for work category for things like, if there's nudity or something, something else, completely understand. Now, my thinking was, should this be at all in the ballpark of something that should be labeled not safe for work? And then I didn't put this in a video, but it was about, I don't know, a week later when the picture on my homepage got flagged as not safe for work, and I had to appeal that as well. But it's just a painting of Socrates, and so I was basically thinking that I'd be dealing with a similar situation on YouTube, which is namely that all my content gets flagged. So, in other words, there are bad actors involved. There are people who aren't going, "Whoa, this content is shocking. I need to flag this." It's David Wood posted something. Let's go flag it. And so everything I post on YouTube gets flagged. And the problem is it goes to, some human reviewer. And a lot of the human reviewers are just, "Yep, I don't like that." And so it's not whether it follows the rules or not. It's just, let me go ahead and click on this. So basically, all of my stuff will get flagged. Everything I post will get flagged. And so here's what it looked like. It looked like, well, everything I post is going to get flagged. So everything that I post is going to have to go and get me a temporary strike for not safe for work. I would appeal it. I would win all of those appeals, but it seemed like now there's this extra step where everything that I post is going to get me a strike, and then I'm going to have to go to this sort of online jury system review and then get my stuff put back up as safe for work. Because as far as I can tell, all my stuff is safe for work. There's nothing too risque in anything I post. So anyway, those were my thoughts, and so there was that. I had one more concern, but what are your thoughts on that? Because again, I look at this and I say, I don't like having this extra step where I post it and then it goes through this long process of strike and appeal, and then it's okay. I don't like that, but I'm not exactly sure what the process would be. What would be better?
I completely understand where you're coming from. So let me first say that in terms of monetization, we actually allow NSFW to be monetized. So there's actually not even a such thing as demonetization on Minds. And in terms of, there is an NSFW category about race and religion. And we've had a lot of internal debates about, if that's too broad or like what exactly that should be. But unfortunately, like, legitimate criticism of religion, which it appears to, I haven't watched all of your content or anything, but it appears to me that you're like a legitimate, critic of certain religions, and that that's obviously important. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that probably got lumped in with some of the more harsh slur type stuff about religion, and I don't know what happened. I wasn't involved in the report, or I actually even think that the person who on our end may have allowed that to be marked NSFW isn't even with the company anymore. But regardless, those kinds of things are sort of inevitable, and we really thought deeply about how we can prevent ourselves from becoming biased. And I understand you don't want to go through a step each time. And I think that there should be a process for a channel like yours to not have to deal with that. because if it's the same kind of thing happening over and over again, that seems like a little bit unnecessary. It was the initial rollout of the system, and it seemed like, a mistake was made. It seems like the system worked in a way, but I also understand the inconvenience. But I also want you to understand that it's different from YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, because we're not saying you're going to get banned. We're saying that your channel could eventually get into this category, which isn't even necessarily a positive or negative category. It's just a category, and it's not necessarily a punishment either. It's just a way for us to categorize content. But I get it why you're frustrated. But the reason we reached out right after is because we recognized that it was sort of a problem, and we wanted to figure out how to, talk to you and figure out, is there a way we can improve the system? But, we've thought deeply about it, and blurs and opt-in layers for more controversial stuff. I mean, I support controversial content. You need controversial content on the internet. That's what free speech is for. You don't need free speech unless it's for controversial content. So the question that you're asking is correct. What is the alternative solution if you're not going to create opt-in blurs and screen flows? And I've looked really deeply about it. We're totally open to other ideas, but I'm curious your thoughts on other possibilities.
I agree. I agree on the not safe for work feature. It's more along the lines of how stuff gets labeled and what the process is. So yeah, it does make sense. I can't think of. It seems like, guys, in case you're new to this and you've never seen that before, here's the idea. If YouTube or Facebook or something like that says, we don't like your content, they block it. They give you a strike. If that happens a couple times, they'll just kick you off the platform or something like that. And it's completely bogus and absurd, the things that they say that they're blocking you for. I don't violate any rules on YouTube, and yet I get blocked regularly. I get my content blocked pretty regularly over basically the human reviewer who just doesn't like my stuff, right? The stuff goes back to a human reviewer, and a lot of these guys get their job coming straight out of their safe spaces on college campuses, and anything they've been trained, anything they don't like is hate speech, and so they just say, oh, that is hate speech, even though it's not any rational person's definition of hate speech. So, but here's the idea. On a platform like Minds, instead of Minds saying this content has to be banned, it's more like this content is just gonna be blurred because it might not be safe for work. And again, if you're at work and your coworkers around and you're flipping through the site on your lunch break, you don't want certain things popping up on your screen, and so they would just blur it, and then you could click on if you say that it's okay. So that seems like a good system. It's more, my concern was more along the lines of, what do you do when you're a target by trolls and professional group of harassers who just constantly go around blocking content. You did have a question here, which would be a good start to sort of leading into some more of this. Bart Connolly says, what opinions does Bill Ottman consider so dangerous it has to be banned? So here I don't think he's talking about not safe for work, but what sort of like if someone were you were drawing the distinction between legitimate criticism of religion versus something else. So guys, you should all be familiar with that. We talk about various religious issues: atheism, Christianity, Islam. We have Muslims and Christians and atheists and Hindus in the chat. I have atheist and Hindu moderators on my channel. So we all have these discussions, but you also know there are people who come in there and say, nuke Mecca, kill these people, kill this group, and so on. Right. So that's kind of
that's a true threat of violence. So we're taking the First Amendment approach. There are a couple of exceptions, like if someone's like spamming, maliciously spamming the network, that's sort of a different type of malicious activity that's not necessarily covered in the First Amendment. But I mean, true threats of violence are not okay, but otherwise it's okay. And it's not about like my opinion. This is why we're basing our policy in the First Amendment, because to be honest, the overhead of moderation on Twitter and Facebook is just insane. I don't know if you saw the Veritas leaks yesterday, I think it was, but it was pretty much the moderator sitting there saying, every time they see a certain opinion, they just ban it, because they feel like they're doing a justice by that. And I can tell you that we have moderators, and they may have made a mistake, but we try to balance that out by like directly reaching out to you after it happened to try to work with you and figure out if there's a way that we can solve it. Because if the mistakes are going to happen, it's almost unavoidable, and we feel like we can compensate for that by being the most accessible network in terms of fixing issues. Like, there's humans over here. We want to fix the problems. We're not just going to send a bot response. And we are confident that, as a community, we can work through the edge cases or the mistakes.
Mm-hmm. And again, that is good. And so I guess the takeaway for me would be understand that there are humans involved, and that there, if people are dealing with false flags and stuff, that mistakes are going to be made in any system, even if it's functioning very, very well. And therefore, the problem is I really love hyperbole, right? So if someone does something, I'm like, this person is.
I know it felt like you were going a little bit overboard. I get why you're pissed, and I think you deserve to be pissed, because you're like, oh, I'm on this free speech network, and then you're like, okay, same old shit. I don't know. Hopefully, I didn't just get you demonetized.
We deal with worse stuff here, so
okay. So I get it, but I also felt like, you were sort of intentionally sensationalizing it to a certain degree because you were upset, when we're clearly not them, and we do a million things that are the opposite of them. So, it's okay. I think you should be pissed, and we need to be able to take the feedback and understand how we can prevent the edge cases. So we've considered moving the jury to the first degree of moderation, so that we actually don't even have admins like on our team making these decisions, and that it's sort of all run by the community. So even the first reports are not just the appeals, but the first reports are going to a community jury. There's a lot of reports, so it's not totally clear to me that we will be beta testing that process to back away from even the initial decision. And if you look at the stats on the jury so far, it's pretty interesting. Let me pull it up for some analytics. So if you go to minds.com/content-policy and you go to the bottom, you can see that in the last 30 days, there were 7,794 actions taken by Minds, 30 appeals, and 10 actions overturned. So of 7,800 actions total, there were 30 people who said, I want to appeal. And so 10 mistakes. So out of 7,800 actions, 10 mistakes. It's not bad. It's not bad, and I think that we want to continually improve that. But the fact that they were able to be overturned, to me, is success. And so even if there are mistakes, the fact that they're getting fixed, that's a beautiful thing. I mean, I don't know of another network that is achieving that type of objectivity to their own process.
Mm-hmm. Let me give you. I do have a concern about the jury system. On the one hand, it seems good to have something outside of some little small centralized group like one of these platforms trust and safety teams who just they get to decide whatever they want, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. And so there is something cool about being able to step outside of them and say, well, what do actual users think? But what if you're someone like me who I don't particularly trust people, right? In other words, I don't necessarily trust the people that this is going out to, right? So if you send it out to 7 reviewers and you ask 7 reviewers, hey, do you agree with this decision? How does that work anyway? Is it 7 or is
so
it?
So the mandate,
the
mandate is not like, do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
The mandate is to enforce the First Amendment based policy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, could people potentially get selected for a jury and be like, I'm going to go on a moral crusade and
mm-hmm.
do what I want to do? Not
That's
what
my concern.
It's a legitimate concern, but at the end of the day, it's like we're trying to create a more perfect
mm-hmm.
system, and because there is not a perfect system,
mm-hmm.
and particularly when you're dealing with the internet, which is insane. You're dealing with just I can't even list it all. It is insane. The spectrum of content that is going on is just it's wild, and there's also it's a smaller percentage of wild content, but it's there. And so we're just trying to create a more perfect system. Honestly, our code is open. We have developers around the world who are contributing to it. We're totally open for improvements to it. If we can detect people who are consistently voting in the jury in a way that is against our system, we're working on detecting that. So if someone is consistently in the minority and they're wrong in terms of enforcing the First Amendment-based policy, we're working on trying to detect that so that they would no longer be able to participate in the jury. And we're also looking at expanding the jury beyond 12 people so that, it seems like with higher numbers, there's probably less chance for error. But, we're open to proposals. And, at the end of the day, a lot of people like to, I'm not saying this in an overly critical way, but people love to complain and not build software.
Mm-hmm.
So building software is the hard part, and designing products is the hard part. So it's easy to say, oh, this sucks. This is more of the same. But it's like, okay, what is your actual suggestion? Like, here's the code. This is how the juries are working. This is the size. This is the prompt. You can go look at the UX of it. You can make criticisms. Send us the exact product design adjustments that you're interested in making, and let's look at it and let's have that conversation. That the number of people who are actually going to go that deep is a much, much smaller number of people. It's so much easier to actually go back on Twitter or YouTube or Facebook and say, be on the big tech platforms, be like, oh, this free speech platform sucks. But you're saying it on the other platform that's clearly way worse. So, but at the end of the day, I get it. Mm-hmm. We have a responsibility to build an epic product, and we're working on it.
Yeah, here's a question that would sort of lead into the other part of my thinking on some of this stuff. So this is Nikolaska says, hey, David, ask him how much pressure he is ready to take until he adjusts to the modern narrative. So here, this was kind of my concern, because all of these platforms, they all start off by saying, yes, everyone come here, everyone is welcome, everyone's here, everyone's welcome, everyone's here. And then they grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And then the more they grow, the more they decide, actually, now we have to start controlling what you say. But by that time, you're already hooked in the system. You've already spent years on the system. Most of the people you interact with in your day are through that system. And so it's very difficult to just say, well, I don't like what this system is doing now, so I'm getting off it. So you're sort of stuck to it. So basically, here's my thinking as far as me flipping out. It's kind of I started off on all these platforms, and then one by one, they start telling me, Nope, you can't say that thing that you could say at any other time in our history, but we just decided now that even though there's nothing in our rules that says you can't say that, a human reviewer is going to say whatever he wants about it, and we're going to start blocking you for that. And then so that the concern is now we see Minds, and Minds is saying, "Hey, everyone, come over here. We're not doing that." But as you get bigger and bigger, the pressure is going to come down on you more and more. And so I'm thinking, wait a minute, if they're already starting, so it was mainly not, hey, this is a horrible system, it's just like YouTube. It's more like if they've got this small issue now, and the pressure is just going to keep growing, it kind of looks like they're going to head in the same direction as some of these other platforms. So the idea here is Minds gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. What happens when there's all this massive pressure from the media and everyone else saying you're radicalizing people?
We already have that pressure. So here's what I'll say. Honestly, I probably would have done the same thing if I were you for how you reacted. But here's the thing. Facebook never had a First Amendment-based policy, ever. They were maybe more lenient, and maybe the policy has gotten more strict. But Twitter never had a First Amendment-based policy either. They never said that. They were more open, and Twitter did have a slogan like the free speech wing of the free speech party or something like that, which is insane. But they never actually said First Amendment based. So that's a really important distinction, that, you know, we are saying that, and obviously it would be suicide to abandon that. It also doesn't make sense from an overhead perspective of moderation. If you are enforcing terms that are like, oh, this word isn't okay in this context, this word isn't okay, you have to hire 5,000 more moderators to sift through all the reports, and suddenly your moderation job is 100x. So, and not to mention, the media already, the media that wants to target us has already targeted us. They're already coming after us for that, and we try to explain to them, actually, if you look at the research about censorship causes radicalization. I mean, look at what it did to you. You bugged out. I'm not that that's a radical, not that you got radicalized, but I'm just saying, look at the emotional reaction you had to getting censored. When that woman went and shot some people at the YouTube headquarters, I don't know if you remember that. She was mad about getting censored. If you look at a lot of the peer-reviewed research around this topic, censorship can cause violence. There's dozens of studies. So our response to the media who tells us, you guys are causing radicalization, you're causing, more extremists or Nazis or whatever. It's actually not true if you look at the empirical evidence around the topic, which is why we brought on Daryl Davis to our advisory board, who has successfully gotten, hundreds of people to leave the KKK. And he did that by befriending them and respecting their free speech and having conversations. And guess what? Over time, through discourse, society calms down. If you want to flare up society, you ban stuff. So what we say to the media is, you're actually taking the emotional reaction that causes more extremism and more polarization.
No, you are absolutely correct. And by the way, that's probably the main factor in me getting ticked off when something gets banned, is not that, I'm so angry that my content gets banned. It's that I understand the impact this has on society. This goes way back to when, it was way back in the early 2000s, and there were those Jyllands Postens, I think in Danish it's Jyllands Posten or something like that. They posted these series of Muhammad cartoons, and it had never crossed my mind that I'm going to start posting cartoons or something like that. But when people started killing over it, then it became, and none of the media would post the cartoons. No other journalists were willing to post the cartoons. Yale University even put out a book on the cartoons. They wouldn't include the cartoons in the book. And I'm just thinking, wait a minute, if someone says, it seems to me if someone says, hey, I'm going to kill over this, then I'm going to kill over this speech, then everyone needs to jump out and do that speech. Whoever it is, I don't care, atheist, Christian, Muslim, whoever, someone says, hey, I'm going to kill you if you say this or do this or draw this cartoon, then everyone needs to say, well, then we're all going to do it until you decide that we're allowed to say that. And so it seemed to me that by everyone then not posting the cartoons, even if they're talking about them, they kind of reinforced, hey, if you want to get your way, turn to violence, and then we'll all back down. We'll all just back down immediately. And then eventually we got to Anders Breivik, who goes on a killing spree in Norway, and I downloaded his 1,500-page manifesto. Some of it is completely irrelevant stuff, like his daily schedules and recipes and stuff. But all of the sections that were on his thought processes, I read all those, and it was completely different from what I was hearing about him in the media. The media were saying that he's radicalized by listening to Robert Spencer, Pamela Geller, and these things. And I looked at his manifesto. He started planning this. He started planning his attack before anyone had ever heard about any of these people. And I looked at his actual reasoning for turning to violence. And this was all the way back in the 90s, which is why he's so scary. It's scary when a guy decides to do something in the 90s and says, if I need to take 10 or 15 years to plan this perfectly, that's what I'm going to do. Much more dangerous than someone who just, runs out and starts shooting or something like that. But he says in his manifesto that he started becoming concerned about various problems. But he said that in my country, if you try to raise any sort of question or criticism about certain positions, they'll just call you racist and they'll shut you down, and you will not even allow you to voice your concern. And so he said he basically came to conclude that speech is useless. We've entered a post-free speech civilization where all the avenues and channels for open discussion are blocked and banned, and therefore the only way to get your message across is to go on a killing spree. And you find something similar with that guy who did the mosque shooting down in New Zealand. That's someone who had given up on free speech because he believes that any of his concerns that he raises. So guys, just try to understand, even if you're a total scumbag, right? Even if you're a total scumbag with scumbag ideas, if you say, hey, I've got this thing and it's really, really bothering me and I want to talk about it, and someone says you're not allowed to talk about it, well, guess what? That didn't take away those concerns. It's just told you that, well, talking about it is not going to be the way to go. Whereas, as you pointed out, there are actually people who take the KKK and de-radicalizing them by getting them in a process of discussion. Now, just imagine that instead of that, he just silence them every time they try to raise any concern they have. You're not de-radicalizing anyway. You'd make them more radical. You'd make them more inclined to turn to violence. And so, yeah, this is when we look at sort of this phenomena, and then we see that the censorship is escalating on all of the main platforms. It's like, do you guys know what you're doing? Do you know that you're creating an entire generation of violent radicals and not just people saying messed up stuff? Very, very disturbing.
And the offensive part about it is that their justification is that they are de-radicalizing by I mean, that's usually the excuse for censorship, is that, this idea is going to cause violence. Mm-hmm. And, the idea is dangerous, not the censorship. But, I mean, if we had the resources, we would be funding studies right now trying to correlate the big tech censorship with the violence. And, there have been major studies done. I mean, there was a study of hundreds of millions of posts on Reddit, which concluded, it was asking if Reddit's new censorship policies were working. And, the media came out and said, Vice did a piece. Study shows that Reddit censorship works. But actually, if you read the study, it says that the speech just went and got worse in other parts of the internet. So it didn't. Can you hide ideas? Yeah, you go. It's happening. But can you get rid of those ideas? No. And the psychological damage that you're causing by pushing those ideas under the rug is, just terrifying. So, it was like when Vice wrote that article, they didn't want to read the study. They just wanted to, make a political point about, if you can censor. Yes, guess what? You can censor. Can censorship appear to work? Yes, but does it? No.
Along these lines, because you mentioned a pro freedom of basically First Amendment type policy. So guys, understand what when we're talking about sort of broad approaches. A First Amendment type policy is more along the lines of your speech is protected, and so I guess is the idea here that a platform is kind of like a mini version of the United States, and that the people who run the platform are more along the lines of the government, where they are not going to interfere with free speech unless it crosses lines. Is that the idea behind a freedom of speech model?
The EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is like a digital rights group, they back in the day drafted a document called the Manila Principles. If you go to manilaprinciples.org, you can read them, and there was like hundreds of sites, digital intermediaries that signed on to this. We signed on to it, and it basically talks about digital intermediaries not taking down content unless there's a court order to take down the content. And like I mentioned, spam and certain other sort of like malicious types of behavior, we're not going to wait. We're never going to get a court order to take down like a malicious spammer. But generally speaking, that's what we like to stick to. And so that's what makes sense. Why would we behave differently than, a phone company or a bank? And why should we be injecting our own beliefs upon the communications that are flowing through the network? So that's just something that instinctually we agree with, and it makes sense in terms of the research. It makes sense in terms of the philosophy. And in terms, I think where we need to focus is honestly on this area of the blur, the NSFW blur, not impacting content that it shouldn't impact. Because when you have like the cartoons of Muhammad, or you'll see a lot of the cartoons that are like of the Jewish guy, with all the big sort of body features, nose, and a lot of people will say, okay, that's anti-Semitic. I don't know if you want that on your screen, when you're at work. I do think that it should be up to you. We allow the option to turn off that filter, but the reality is that there's controversy in the middle.
Yeah. And
that's where the mistakes are going to happen. All I can say is that on Minds, the mistakes don't get you banned. They, in order to coexist with regular cat photos and all of the most hardcore speech that you can think of, you need to, there's no like half blur. There's a point where a content gets thrown into a bucket, and we have an appeals process, and we want to keep making it better. And I think there should probably maybe be an option for a channel that repeatedly is mistakenly getting put into the bucket, maybe should get whitelisted, or maybe you could have something like that to prevent repetitive mistakes on a certain channel, or if a certain channel is getting targeted. But these are the types of nuances that need to get coded. They need to get built into the report queues and into the tagging system on the channels. And this is the kind of stuff that takes years to build, and a lot of money and resources. And we do want to make that happen. It takes time and patience, and we're trying to make, like you mentioned rightly in the beginning, what is going to prevent us from caving to all of the pressures that will come to us in terms of, media or demonetization and whatnot. The reason we moved to a hybrid fiat currency and crypto system is because we knew we needed to integrate crypto, because payment processors can just come at us and say, hey, you better take that down or else we're going to take away your revenue stream. So we knew we needed to provide, not only ourselves, but our channels and our creators with the option to get paid out in crypto, because that enables us to tell Stripe, well, guess what? We pay, in crypto to NSFW channels, and you can never take away that stream. So it's just not in our interest to go down that road. But I also, don't want to go down the road of being like, oh, trust us. Like, we're the free speech network. You better trust us. Like, the new internet is trustless. You shouldn't have to trust us. And so that's why infrastructure that is powered by the people and not only powered by us is the future. So it shouldn't be an issue of us even being able to take it down. Now, I'm not going to say that we're in that position. Like, that's a utopian goal of being uncensorable. And we're trying to get there, and we're trying to integrate peer-to-peer content systems so that we can facilitate that. Mm-hmm. But it takes time.
Mm-hmm. We did have we do have a lot of international viewers, and so some people were asking. So Sophia Agape said, "Who here isn't American? Do you understand the First Amendment?" And let me just go ahead and read it for anyone who I assume that most people outside of the United States are still familiar with the idea. But so this is for anyone who's outside the United States. We're a constitutional republic, so we have a constitution, and that constitution comes with a Bill of Rights, and these are rights, and the Bill of Rights is basically a list of things that the government cannot do to you. The main goal of the founding fathers was to avoid a tyranny, avoid any particular small group from being able to establish a tyranny over you, right? So that's why you have a system of checks and balances. That's why you have a Bill of Rights. They're trying to say, let's not end up with the same situation that people have had in the past. So the First Amendment just says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So it's just simply saying that the government is not going to stop you from doing these kinds of things. And so a free speech approach, First Amendment approach on a platform would be different from something like some of the platforms that you're most familiar with, and that those platforms might say, here's a list of all the things you can't do and you can't say on our platform, and they can kind of make rules that they want. The problem is how they actually end up using those policies, because what they do is they'll say, we have a rule against this, and then they'll apply it to basically any speech that they don't like. And so you end up with something that's just massively dysfunctional, and it's getting worse by the day, because you can tell where people's concerns are at. What happens when the pressure comes down on you? They're saying that because they know Twitter will cave, Facebook will cave, YouTube will cave. Any of these, if you put either public condemnation against them, they'll cave. And if you put financial pressure on them, they'll cave, right? So when the ad agencies say, hey, we don't like that you have this policy, they just back down. Now, along this issue, because it's good that you're sort of zeroing in on where the difficult area lies. This is people ask why I don't post more on BitChute. Well, BitChute does not do a good job of basically not seeing content that you don't want to see, right? So I'll post a video on BitChute, and then there's the little discussion right below it. And on YouTube, I actually don't have a problem with that. If someone comes on there and he's saying, hey, kill people or something like that, I could just block him, and I don't have to see that person again. On BitChute, I can block myself from seeing some, but it's worse because people can post pictures. They can't post pictures in the YouTube comment section. In the BitChute comment section, they can post pictures. And so you could post a video on any topic and you'll end up with a massive number of anti-Semites, anti-blacks, anti-Muslims in the sense that they're not criticizing the ideology. They're calling for, their deaths and so on. And you post it down there and you can block yourself from seeing them, but they're still down there underneath your video. You can see because people are responding to them, and they'll basically take any situation, any video on any topic, and they'll turn it into, the Jews or something like that, and a big argument about the Jews. And I'm just thinking, I don't want you to be forced to stop talking about anything that concerns you, but I don't want to see it. So in terms of freedom of speech, I kind of view, platforms as kind of, like miniature internet versions of countries, in the sense that you have the government, and the government shouldn't be blocking speech. But if I don't want to hear you, guess what? I can go to my house and I don't have to hear you. I don't have to hear anything you say. And so it should kind of be like that. And so how do you navigate? Now, if I recall
But isn't that interesting that you find yourself on sort of both sides of the conversation there? Mm-hmm. Because, the reason for that happening has to do with permissions controls, blocking tools, all of which is pretty complicated software to build. I'm sure they're working on it. We're working really hard on it, ultimately providing the user and the creator control to see what they want to see, allow the types of comments, or, allow comments at all. All that stuff takes a really long time to build. And it's just, I appreciate you saying that, because that is exactly the challenge. And so we put a lot of time into building these filtering mechanisms. But the problem is that, someone who posts something in your comment section that disagrees with it, is suddenly going to erupt on YouTube about it. And it's like, but that you need those tags in order to provide the control to people to see what they want to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my kind of, as far as the big issues, I think the platforms, a pro First Amendment type platform should not be banning content, but the people who use it need to have all the powers at their disposal to say, hey, I don't want to see certain kinds of content. I don't ever want to see it. I don't ever want to see something from this guy. I don't like him. And so it's how do you get that? And guys, because this is kind of a big issue, right? This whole internet age is kind of a new period. We're finding new ways of interacting with each other and getting along with each other without violating people's rights. And this stuff takes time. We're figuring these things out right now. So just to give everyone an idea, back in the 90s, there were these, as platforms were emerging, the concern became, what happens if people are posting all this, gore or something on there, and you don't want your kids seeing it? What do you do? And so they came up with Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act to say that, the platforms won't be held responsible for content posted on there, but it also gave them the ability to block certain content in good faith if there's, gore and stuff like that, and there's kids there and stuff like that. So that became the concern. But here we are more than 2 decades later, and these platforms are relying on those rules. Namely, they're not responsible for the content, and yet they can block content in good faith. And it's just absolutely insane how they're using it. So they'll say, we have a policy here, no hate speech, but the trust and safety, there's no one over the trust and safety team at YouTube. They could just say anything they don't like is hate speech. And just to give people a parallel, and then we'll probably be wrapping up after that, so you can respond to this and add anything else that you like, Bill. But how this is being used, if you understand how this is actually being used, suppose you had a restaurant and that you are like a white supremacist and you didn't want any black people in your restaurant. Well, you can't just come out and say, I don't want any black people in my restaurant. You can't say that. It's illegal. But what you could say is, well, we have a no nudity policy. And then every time a black family shows up to your restaurant, you say, oh, sorry, you're not allowed in here. You're nude. And they say, what are you talking about? I'm not nude. And they say, yeah, we've decided that you're nude, so you have to get out of here. Now, notice, you're doing exactly what you want to do. you're blocking people that you don't want in your restaurant. But you're not allowed to say why you're really blocking them, so you come up with this alternative explanation for why you're blocking them, and then you just apply this ridiculous explanation to them. And so you could do that with anyone. You could block any kind of people you want by saying you're blocking them for another reason. That's what these platforms are all doing. They're saying, oh, we're against hate speech. You're against hate speech, right? Yeah, we're all against hate speech. Okay. Well, anything that this trust and safety team member doesn't happen to agree with, he can block and call it hate speech. Well, now you're not blocking hate speech. You're blocking content for other reasons, and it's massively messed up. So you have this huge issue of how are we navigating this, one of the biggest changes in human civilization that's ever occurred. How do we navigate this? And you see where it's where people are using it to establish a tyranny. Right? They're establishing tech tyrannies over everyone, and my goodness, that is what we have to be against. So, Bill, any thoughts on any of that? And
yeah, I mean, it's fascinating that they even had the phrase "in good faith" in Section 230. I mean, it seems like a very hazy phrase to be in a legal document. But 230 provides immunity. It's not just about gore. It does give platforms the ability to have moderation policies. I mean, I fully agree that what all of the big tech sites have done in terms of being pretty loose on moderation for their whole growth phase. They got hundreds of millions of people by being pretty relaxed about everything, and then now that they've reached critical mass, they're locking down. It's basically false advertising to a certain degree. At the same time, I don't think that any of them ever had First Amendment based policies. They might have been more loose with it. But they never said that, and they were always spying on everybody. Mm-hmm. They were always sort of abusing their users from the beginning. Granted, they've Web 2, Facebook, Google, Twitter, they've done great things for the world, but they're totally corrupt. They're not transparent. The moderation policies are out the window. The surveillance is insane. We don't know what's going on. And so the litmus test for me joining a new network is it open source? Can I see the algorithms? Can I understand what's actually happening? Is there shadow banning occurring? Granted, most people aren't going to go and inspect the code, but if the code's open source, guess what? The hackers, the cybersecurity people, the developers, they're going to do the work for you, and they're going to write articles about it and let everyone know that this is audited. If it's unauditable, it's totally unaccountable. So that's a tough one because most people don't care. They're like, open source, what is that? Why do I care? It's not that you're going to go look at the code. It's a principle. It's the same with are the communications encrypted? Is there a commitment to the First Amendment? We're not perfect. We're trying to build a better system. And it's going to take time. It's going to take patience. Mistakes are going to get made, but you just have to look at the foundational principles of the network. And is it doing its best to get there? And is it communicating with the users to improve? So anyway, man, I really appreciate you having me on. I hope that you'll hop back on Minds, post once in a while. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, if you have any issues, minds.com/Ottman, Ottman. Feel free to directly, message me. Let us know your ideas. If you have specific recommendations for helping make the system better, we're listening, and we want to improve.
Let me hand that one over to the jury. Guys, what do you think? What do you think of Bill's approach here and mine? Should we start posting on Minds again here? Let me know what you think, and along the lines of, what you just mentioned about the platforms. I actually have no problem with them saying we don't allow this kind of content, or we don't allow racist content or something like that. It's the idea that they all state their policies and then they apply those policies to people who aren't violating the policies as an excuse to block them for other reasons, and just absolutely insane. All right, guys. So we're gonna go ahead and close out now. But guys, what do you think? Should we? Because there is this big question, right? Everyone's looking for the best alternative to the main platforms, and so what do you think? about mines versus some of the other alternatives. Well, looks like people are saying, let's see, we got the jury here. So Finding Truth says, yep. A bunch of people said they went and signed up for mines. BJ says, yes. Slamoran says, thanks for coming on. Phyllis says, yes. Warrior Woman says, yes. Gene says, give it a shot. Sela says, yes. Magda says, yes.
Cover your bases. I mean, it's not, supporting alternatives is the only way that alternatives are going to grow. I just recommend people really look into the alternatives and understand if they're really walking the walk. It's easy to say that you're pro-privacy and you're pro-free speech and you're pro-transparency, but if the code's not open source, if it's not encrypted, then it's not that much different. They're saying trust us. They're not saying, hey, look at the algorithms. At the end of the day, diversity, I think, in platforms is a positive thing, though.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, it looks like everyone's unanimous on using mines. So, all right, guys, we'll go ahead and try out Mines as an alternative platform for a year. So continue with whatever platforms you're using, but also use Mines, because keep in mind, if there's ever a meltdown when everyone gets fed up with YouTube and decides we're done with YouTube, you need other platforms that are already right there and established and that you've been using and that you're familiar with. So the idea is whatever you're using, you want to use some alternatives and be on those platforms and be active on those platforms. All right, so everyone, after we're done here, I will add the Minds link to my channel. I haven't used it in over a year, but my channel's still there because they don't take it down. So I'll go ahead and add that back. And guys, follow me on Minds, and we'll see how that goes and see how you like it. All right, thanks to Bill Ottman for joining us and explaining the issues here that are involved, and for being far more transparent than any other companies that we're used to right now.
Thanks for having me.
Catch y'all later.